Hi, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight On. I'm Brendan Lowe with the Camden City School District. Today, we're talking about women in science, and we're joined by two of our science teachers here in Camden City School District, Ms. Thompson from MetEast High School and Ms. Kaur from Woodrow Wilson High School. Thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your experience. Generally speaking, women are underrepresented in the sciences, but you're both leading teachers in our district. You're both on the Superintendent's Teacher Roundtable. So why don't we start at the beginning and talk a little bit about how you ended up as science teachers. You first were students, obviously. So to the extent that you're willing to share for some of your students who might be watching, what were you like as a student? Were you interested in the sciences when you were a student back in elementary, middle, and high school?
Okay, so I actually grew up in India when I was little, and my grandfather used to be very sick, so we didn't have a lot of doctors in the nearby villages, so I always knew that I wanted to go into medical field. So when I did come to the United States at the young age, science and math is what I understood. I had a hard time with English, so I really focused on that and just became very interested in it. And even at high school, my teachers were very supportive of me. And so I was a very good student. I was actually a nerd, I'll be honest to say that. And I actually did my undergrad in biochemistry. At that point, I wasn't even thinking about teaching. I went into the industry, worked at a pharmaceutical company for a little bit. And then while I was working there, I was doing great things, but I knew I wasn't really making a difference. So I knew that I wanted to go back into teaching, so I went back and got a master's in teacher leadership. And ever since then, I've been teaching in Camden City.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Ms. Thompson, what about you?
It's actually quite the opposite for me. I was an average student at best. I was transferred from Liverpool to Woodrow Wilson. It was a culture shock all over the place, so I was trying to readjust to the different environment. The classes were different, the experience was different, and I always had this interest, though, in learning and trying to understand how things work. So I think that combination of just trying to figure things out and that being the safest place for me in terms of trying to learn in an environment that was different from what I was used to, I sort of started to find myself drawn to learning science and being in the company of science teachers or science like-minded people. So.
And when you, just a few clarifying points, when you say you came from Liverpool to
Liverpool
Woodrow
High School, I was
Okay.
transferred from Liverpool High into Woodrow Wilson my 10th going on my 11th grade year. And during both times, I was not really a serious student. I was kind of trying to figure things out. 9th grade year, it was new to me, just being in a high school setting. And again, it was completely two different worlds. I wouldn't even be able to connect the inquisitiveness, the eager to learn scientific things with actually learning in school. To me, they were completely two different worlds. I thought just trying to figure out the reproduction of a slug was just something cool to do. And when I would go to school, even though I was in science classes, I thought they were two different worlds because my experience were different. And when I learn from a science perspective, it's very investigative, it's ongoing. But when you learn in a traditional setting, you're following the curriculum and this is what you learn. And it may not be of any interest to you, but this is how it goes. You follow the steps. So when I was in college is when I was able to merge the two worlds together. And that made a difference in the way that I received it and how excited I was in pursuing that as a career path.
Interesting. And Ms. Kaur, for you, what did you like about science? It was important to you from a kind of a historical, personal, familial perspective, but what made it easier? Some people say, I'm a math person or I'm not a math person, or science not. What do you think about math and science kind of engaged you in the way that they did in high school especially?
We had a lot of hands-on experiments to do, and then in a science class, I didn't really have to talk to my peers that much because I was still struggling with the English language. So, and it actually kind of makes sense to me because I'm a very analytical thinker. So whereas I struggled in my English classes, so I used to look forward to going into my science classes. I took like every single science they could offer me, all 4 years. I did that, and I was just really passionate about that.
Huh. And then when you studied biochemistry in college, Ms. Thompson, what did you study in college?
I actually wanted to be an ophthalmologist.
Oh, wow.
So I was a pre-med as an undergrad.
Okay. And for the students who are currently in high school or middle school and thinking about what do I want to be when I grow up, what do I want to study, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to study those topics at the college level? What it looks like? Is it actually harder? Do you have labs that are 4 hours long? Do you continue to have the hands-on learning? What is it? Speaking of gender, are most of your classmates one or the other? Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like?
For me, most of my peers were males. There were maybe 2 to 3 females per class. Oh. And usually I was at least maybe 50%, representing 50% of the females, and sometimes I was the only African American woman of color in my classroom. I remember most of my classes having predominantly Caucasian males. And I had a couple experiences in which we would have labs and we would have to switch our partners. And for every time that we switch our partners, I found out that, not to say that my struggle was to understand why there was only me. And when I started having issues with certain topics, because I went to a school where the assumption was whatever classes you have in high school, you'll have the same exact class as a pre-med, and that's not the case. For some students, it's actually a review. For others, you're actually learning something completely different, which is why we discussed earlier, for 9th graders, you guys have environmental science. We don't have environmental science at all. So the assumption is that everyone's following the same curriculum. The truth is it's not the case. So when you're in a classroom and you now have a topic that you've never been taught, it may take a little longer for you to grasp the subject. So when I was reviewing, when people were reviewing, I was actually learning new topics, and so I had my fair share of struggles. And I remember having this professor that I've always admired, and I was struggling with something that was completely new to me, but for everyone else it was a review. And he said, I think you should probably go into psychology. And I thought, interesting. I do enjoy psychology, but I do love and I have the passion for learning biology. And realizing at that time that this was not the major for a lot of females, especially females of color, I struggled with whether or not that was the right place for me. And so I did think about changing my major, but luckily for me, I had the support that I needed to realize that you're going to have your challenges, and if this is something completely new for you, then you have to stick with it. And that's what I would explain to my students. There are not a lot of role models for me. When I was growing up, most of my teachers were males, and not many of them were of color. So it's good to know that we now have females in this career path to pave the way for a lot of female students growing up. But even if you don't have that, you have to stick to your passion and your interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And good for you for making it through, despite some of the advice that you were given. Ms. Kaur, what about for you as a biochem major?
So I went to a very small school. I went to Rider University. So I was in a small cohort that followed through all 4 years. And we were in a very diverse class. So it was actually very interesting. And as Ms. Thompson was saying, even though I was a very good, I had a 4.0 GPA in high school, I was struggling my first year at Rider University, actually. So one of my professors, she actually reached out to me. She was Asian, and the rest of the professors were Caucasian. I couldn't really connect with them, and they were male. She was the only female. And she treated me like my teachers back home would treat me. And she would act like my mom, really. And she'd be like, okay, you're not getting this. I want to see you after class, you know, every day. So we actually made like study plans on, so I could actually survive that first year. I'm still in touch with her. College is doable. It's scary the first semester. I tell my kids that too. And especially my seniors, I exchange my contact info with them. And I'm like, call me anytime so you can get through this. But it's also very interesting. I loved my coursework, like biochemistry coursework. We had 4-hour labs for biology, chemistry, all of those courses, and we had lectures too. Labs is where it actually, whatever my professor was teaching me, it actually made sense to me. I'm like, okay, that's what the theory he was trying to teach us to, and we applied it right there that week. So it was really great experience.
Good. But before we go any further, we should probably explain, for depending on the age level of our guests, when we say biochemistry, can you explain it like as you would explain biochemistry to a 6th grader, and then we'll do the same thing with ophthalmology just to make sure we're on the same understanding as our viewers.
So biochemistry is a combination of biology and chemistry. So with that field, you can work in a lab. You could pursue your doctorate, PhD. You could, you know, there's all these options are available to you. So it's a 4-year program. You have to take physics, you have to take biology courses, chemistry, biochem, genetics, you name it. You have to take pretty much all the classes. Yeah. Whereas biology was mostly pre-med, so they focused on all anatomy and physiology, on those sorts of courses. So I am a very analytical person, so I knew, and even though I'm a science teacher, I am scared of blood. I can't see the sight of blood, so I knew that I didn't want to go into pre-med. Right. So biochemistry, you don't really have to deal with that. You're working with DNA. It's already purified and everything. So that's, if you're interested in that, that's the way to go. There you go.
I thought blood was awesome. So ophthalmology has to do with biological sciences, so you're studying the anatomy and physiology of the eyes, and it's a surgical process. You would learn about how, so you would have to take, some of the classes overlap. I would still have to take chemistry and organic chem and anatomy and physiology, botany, zoology, but most of my concentration would be under the umbrella of biological sciences.
Okay, okay. And what are some of the maybe advantages and challenges of being a science teacher? It's not the most popular thing across the country. There's teacher shortages in certain areas, and science at the high school level is one of them. What are some of the kind of perks of the job, and what makes being a science teacher at the high school level particularly challenging?
So we go with the perks first, or?
Sure, you can start with the perks.
The light bulb moment when you realize at that point that the students are getting it, that they're appreciating the art of science, that they're able to use their knowledge into their everyday life. Something as simple as the scientific method, they don't realize that they use it in every aspect of their life. So just to see their minds working, and to have that, to watch them having that investigative approach to everything, definitely, and knowing that you're guiding that along, it definitely is the highlight. However, most of my students, if not all, they have this preconceived notion that biology is just the scariest, or science is just overall one of the scariest thing, math and science. But I've had students, they'll tell me, I don't like science, Ms. Thompson, but you just learned my name yesterday, and already you're telling me that you have this phobia, and this phobia is going to block you from really learning the information. So I guess one of my challenge is to allow them to start anew and to get the experience that we're trying to get, that hands-on experience, getting them to collaborate and create things and feel proud about their work, and to learn different things that they can use in their career and in their school, and you know, just to get them to be excited about something that's meaningful and ongoing.
Sure. Do you notice the for the students who are quick to say science is for me or not for me, Do you notice whether it tends to be male, female? Is it equal?
It's actually equal.
Okay.
It's at that level, and I'm in high school. At a high school level, it's equal. It's more so negative for me, my experience. It's usually negative, but they're equally afraid of it. When you get to a college level, I guess by then fear has taken over, but it's mostly males that you see that are ready to face the music, and most of them are coming with that perception that, you know what, if I'm good at math, then more than likely I can do the science.
Right.
So that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. Ms. Kaur, what about for you in terms of perks and challenges?
So perks is I help shape, you know, and mold future scientists, hopefully. That's the perk, and that's usually my goal. If I could get one by end of the year, I'm successful. Some of the challenges I do face is try to undo the damage, you know, trying to find out why students are not interested in science, trying to see what happened in their prior classes or in middle school, and trying to get them interested. So I'm always trying to find new ways, trying to find the hook, you know, to share with them, try to do demos to engage them into the lessons. So that's a challenge for me. And, you know, some of them do say, Ms. Kaur, you know, I love you, but I have no interest in science, and some of them are saying that to me.
Sure.
But that comes with the job.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things you learn from the students when you ask them about past experiences that might have turned them off or given them more of a closed mind when it comes to kind of their potential in the sciences?
I mean, some of the students say, you know, I guess their teacher didn't put the time and effort to kind of know them or try to find their potential. That's some of the reasons, and some of them, you know, they don't have a full-time, they didn't have a teacher, you know, they had a substitute. So that hinders, you know, their perception about science. So those are some of the things that I hear from them.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite unit or a lesson of yours in any of the classes that you teach that you particularly enjoy teaching? Maybe it's more likely to lead to the light bulb moment that you mentioned, something that's more engaging or controversial, or is there something for you that you kind of thrive on as a teacher?
As I'm teaching my environmental science units, there's a lot of things that you can bring in from, you know, around the globe. So that's, I try to make them global citizens. So we actually had a unit on consumption of like material goods. So, you know, we're like, okay, you know, buying that pair of shoes, all the process that goes behind it, all the, you know, sweatshops, those are making those materials for you. Just kind of giving them that realization, and hopefully in the process, you know, so when they're tempted to go buy the newest gadget or whatever, they'll think about, okay, Ms. Kaur taught me this, this is what's happening to the earth. So that's in a lot of those kind of controversial topics, and I see that's kind of what engages the students into my lesson. Whereas in my biology class, I have mostly upperclassmen, 10th and 11th graders. So at that point, you know, they are taking it seriously, so they're like, okay, mitosis. And one of the units that they really love is when we talk about mutations, and I bring in all these crazy, weird, sometimes gross, you know, real examples. That's what they really like about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of the kind of stuff that you bring in?
I actually brought in, there was this, it's actually not gross, there was this child born in India with like deformities. She had like 6 arms, ligaments, and people were just worshiping her, thinking she was God. So I'm trying to explain to them why they were thinking that, and they were just really engaged in that. So you know, in addition to teaching them that science element, I also brought in, you know, the cultural element, because I've been teaching ESL, that's embedded in me, so I'm always trying to teach them about different cultures, even through science.
Interesting.
So that was
Interesting.
pretty fascinating.
That's neat. Ms. Thompson, what about for you?
For me, under the umbrella of genetics, but we talk about autoimmune diseases, and I try to take my work home with the students, so have them kind of have family time where they talk with their parents and kind of educate their parents or their family members on things that they've learned in class, and try to investigate different type of genetic disorders that are in their family, things that they should be made aware of, things that they want to, converse with their parents to see, hypertension, breast cancer, different type of disorders in their family, and how they can probably reduce that happening for them in terms of whether it's diet or making environmental changes. It just helps to bridge the gap between what's happening at home and just to see that, hey, my child is learning, she's taking things home that we could talk about as a family, and even taking it to their doctor's office and saying, hey, should I be concerned with certain disorders that is in my family. I do have a lot of fun with the Cell City project because there are a lot of different levels of learning in my class, and to have that differentiated instructional piece, it enables me to have my students that are very artistic and students that are very theatrical, students that are very creative, students that are very shy and they need a little push. It encourages a lot of collaboration, so that's definitely one of my favorites. So it's a combination of having things where they have to construct and things where they have to be very investigative and really push forth the investigative process of learning about why does grandmom have hypertension, should I care, and another thing, just being sensitive to other people. So if someone has an albino disorder, if someone has obesity, what's the link, and why should we be very sensitive to people when we see them? And you'd be surprised how interested they become and how sensitive after those topics have been exposed and discussed, that it changed their views and it actually helped in the long run for them not to be so discriminatory.
Are there things that you think you can do as science teachers, some of the things that you're talking about in terms of being born potentially with extra limbs or having cancer and hypertension and some of these things, they can be scary to kids, and maybe numbers in math or words in English or things from the past that are no longer true in history, they're not as scary. And so is there are there things that you can do as science teachers to kind of tip the scales more toward like interesting and engaging and away from kind of scary, frightening, I don't want to go there, I don't want to learn about that, to influence how students are taking in the topics that you're touching on? So
I also bring in, I talk about, the new discoveries, new cures out there for a lot of these kind of disorders with the students. And we actually did a unit on gene therapy, and we actually manipulated that on interactive lab online. So that was pretty interesting, trying to, if they're interested in that, first of all, trying to get them interested into science once they're interested, and then trying to say, okay, you can actually do this. So there's no cure for this disease, and you can actually focus on that and study it and work with this research, and trying to kind of instill that sort of passion in them to get them engaged and interested. So I do try to do that with them.
The problem-solving dynamic, yeah.
Same here. Once they're hooked, usually it takes a lot of work to get them to stay hooked. One of the struggles for a lot of science teachers is to keep the engagement going. But once they're in that space, it's actually pretty easy. They become one of us, if you will, and now they're curious about everything. And with science, it's ongoing. The questions are never enough. They never end because there's a cause and effect to everything. So the initial interest is what's important, and a lot of that comes from exposure or lack thereof. a lot of students, they don't know, you know. They don't know the difference in plants, they don't know the difference in animals, they didn't know the classifications, kingdoms, they had no idea. They thought, you know, fungi and they're all the same thing.
Right.
So just to expose them at first, and once you can expose them, then they have questions for you, and you just become that facilitator. Sometimes it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Try to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Try to combine things that you know that you have to be aware of your audience and your surroundings.
Yeah.
Bring the things that they already know at this point with the new things that you know that they would love to find out about. And that's where the engagement continues and it grows and blossoms.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you touched on earlier about kind of the gender breakdown in your college classes, and share a few statistics here, and then talk about, we'll first talk about the problem, but then in the interest of being solutions oriented, we'll talk about some of the things that you think can be done and that you're doing yourselves in your classes. So a handful of statistics: 1 in 7 engineers is female. 60% of all college graduates, people who earn bachelor's degrees, are female, but only 20% of those that get degrees in computer science are female, 20% for physics, 18% in engineering. Women software developers earn 80% of what men do. So a number of challenges, and the numbers of women in science have kind of stopped rising. They've plateaued in the 70s to the 90s. They went up significantly, but since then they've seen kind of less growth. And so I'm curious, to the extent that you have relevant experience here, either in the classroom as a student getting your own degrees, or now in the front of a classroom, if you have any insights as to why this is a problem in the first place, and a problem that has persisted as well. It's a big question. You can take a crack at it, or just a piece of it.
Okay, so I think we'd have to take fractions of this question.
Sure.
So about why do we think that the percentage in terms of students that are graduating, why are they not graduating as much in terms of...
Or why are they not graduating with science degrees? A lot of more women than men are graduating from college now, but more men than women are graduating with degrees in science.
Well, one of the things you touched on, you said they're making 20% less than men. So we're graduating with the same bill. We still owe the same amount of money, but we're making 20% less. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not an easy degree. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of dedication, and I don't know. It definitely has to do with just how the society treat the male. It's kind of like a touchy subject, actually. Sure. How we treat males in terms of certain courses. That day, for example, there was, for some reason, nothing else, and this professor did not know me. He knew enough that I was in his class. He knew that I was trying to get this right, and I was determined. But he didn't know me enough to think that psychology would be the next best thing. But he told me that he think that would be the place for me to be. It wasn't math, it wasn't anything else. So to me, it's like, in this society, subconsciously, we are kind of forced to make certain decisions. Where that comes from, I'm not quite sure. But when you think of the sciences, and to some degree the math, the society kind of have different expectations on gender.
There was a study done here that a review of 28 companies and performance reviews for employees at these companies working in technology, and 88% of women received critical feedback versus 59% of men. And the word abrasive appeared on women's reviews frequently, while that word was totally absent from men's reviews. So kind of different perceptions of men and women in the tech space. Ms. Kaur, I don't know if you want to take a crack at it. You feel free, or you can pass.
I do want to talk about the statistics
Sure.
that you were talking about earlier. So now, thinking back to my high school and my college year, Most of my professors and teachers were male. I had a middle school science teacher, she was a female, and a biology teacher in high school who was a female. So it's tough. I remember I took physics in my senior year, and I think I was maybe one out of the 2 females in that class. It was just really uncomfortable to be around, and it didn't come easy to me. I just felt like it just was easier for the males, and our teacher was a male. He was into the NASCAR, so I wasn't into that, so he's always bringing in those kind of like, he's bringing those kind of word problems into the class, and I was just not getting it. Even at college, it's just, even the professors, you had to stay till like 9, 10, sometimes 11. It was just a lot. I guess, you hear about stories at college, what kind of happens for your safety and things like that. So I think that was part of it too, that not a lot of, my cohort was pretty diverse, but we mostly had males in there. So I just had to make sure, I had a partner, so if I'd stayed later, they were there with me, so I would feel comfortable. But when I was at a pharmaceutical company, I worked around men, and I felt like I had to do a lot more to show that, I was good enough. And even now, I have to do that in my position. I have to put a lot more effort to be even recognized. So those are some of the reasons, money is also come into play, but then the respect piece and being recognized if it's not there. So, you'd rather be somewhere where you're going to be appreciated.
Yeah.
So
I want to wrap on a slightly more positive note and more upbeat. I appreciate you sharing the insights. So a few things to be optimistic about. One is that some companies seem to be recognizing this, and Pfizer, as just one example, has a program that specifically looks for female employees that they can grow and keep in the company and elevate to more senior positions. And then there was another study that looked at companies that employ large numbers of women versus those that don't. And the companies that do are dramatically more profitable in general when they have more women in leadership positions. Are there things that you do in the classroom or things that you think we can do as a school district and as a city to kind of encourage further participation and help bring and keep more women in sciences, starting as just girls, as students?
Actually, one thing I was talking at this meeting that I was in yesterday, we need to partner with neighboring universities, and they're willing, and we need to have college students, female minority college students, to come in and actually work with our students shadowing, especially our females shadowing those students and experiencing that. I think we need to have those sort of partnerships out there, and the universities are willing. I know Rowan University is willing. They're like, okay, when would you want us to come in? So we definitely need to have that. And
that's great.
For me, and definitely I completely agree, but also to make it not as, from my past, to make it so intimidating. And one way of doing that is to, again, bridge that gap between, I told you I had the 2 completely different worlds. The world where I had a great time learning things on my own, and then there was this world in class where it's curriculum driven, and these are the things you have to do and you have to learn at this point. But to have them connect, and once we're able to connect students' interest with the world of science, it make it a lot less intimidating, and students are more likely to excel, do better, and just embrace it a lot more. So that connectivity is important, and that engagement. And once students are able to identify that it's doable, that it's fun, and that they can get that support they need, I think that we would have a better outcome in terms of how many students, boys, girls, are both interested and they want to actually participate and do better.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do on these issues, of course, is talk about them. And so I appreciate you two coming and talking about these issues, and for what you do in the school district on a daily basis, kind of serving as role models that you spoke of for our own students. And Miss Erica Mullen, it should be mentioned, is a science teacher at Brim, also serves on the teacher roundtable, and is another teacher who couldn't be here today, but is also working in this field for our students. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this episode of Spotlight On, this time focusing on women in science. If you have a suggestion for a future episode of Spotlight On, you can email us at communications@camden.k12.nj.us. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And that's all for now. For this episode of Spotlight On, I'm Brendan Lowe. Thanks very much for watching.